surah that, alhamdulillah, I think most of us are very familiar with. And alhamdulillah, because it's a very, very crucial surah. Honestly, the lessons and the morals and things that we can take out of that surah and how we can apply them to our lives. And it's a surah about just tests, trials, tribulations, difficulties that we are going through now and that we are guaranteed to go through in the future. Because the Prophet ﷺ has encouraged us to read this surah. He's encouraged us in a hadith that we should read this surah on Fridays, a person. And of course, Islamically speaking, our Friday begins Thursday at Maghrib until Friday at Maghrib, that's when it ends. So the Prophet ﷺ has encouraged us to read it on Fridays, and he says the person who reads this surah on Fridays, they will have a nur with them, a light with them that carries on from one Friday until the next. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ also says in a hadith that the person who has, they have memorized, and there's different riwayats, different narrations. One narration basically says the first 10 verses of this surah, and the other narration says the last 10. So scholars just say, well, what's the harm in doing, the first and last 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf and memorizing them and learning them and constantly going over them so that you have them, firm in your mind and understanding these 10 verses. That person will be protected from the fitna of Dajjal. That person, the person who does, proper practice upon these first 10 and last 10 verses of the surah, that person will be protected from the fitna of Dajjal. And of course, the fitna of Dajjal is the greatest fitna to come, and it's also the most interesting thing that, people love to talk about, especially the youth. They get really into talking about Dajjal and when is Dajjal coming and how do we know who he is and what's he going to look like. And of course, it's a topic of lively debate, and that's unfortunate because it should not be. It really should not be, something that we romanticize or something that we spend our times fixating on or hypothesizing or kind of telling it as a bedtime story to scare our kids or our friends. And it's not a campfire story that we share amongst one another. The Prophet ﷺ says that this is the greatest fitna, the greatest trial and tribulation that will ever befall for humankind, mankind in general, will be the fitna of Dajjal. Nothing else will be as severe as what Dajjal will, the threat that he will pose to the people. And he said that, every single prophet who ever came, he warned his people of Dajjal. Every prophet who came, he warned his people that there is going to be a fitna that will come, and it is the fitna of Dajjal. And the Prophet ﷺ himself also warned his Sahaba. And the Sahaba didn't engage in, scary, story time, like we have jinn stories and stuff. And rather, when they heard Dajjal, this actually brought fear into their hearts. It wasn't, interesting that, let's try to find the island that Dajjal is supposed to be on Google Maps or something. No, it was something that they were afraid of. They were thinking like, okay, what will we do if Dajjal comes? And this is the Sahaba, those who were in the companionship of the Prophet ﷺ, those who saw miracles happen in front of them, those who saw Jibreel ﷺ come in the form of a human, those who saw wahi being revealed, revelation coming upon the Prophet ﷺ. And they were afraid for their iman and their yaqeen. Us, on the other hand, for us, it's interesting, it's thrilling. So that's not the approach that we should have. When it comes to the signs of the Day of Judgment, when it comes to the story of Dajjal, when it comes to the fitna that he will bring, it's not something that we get excited about. It's something that should cause us to really reflect. Okay, what will I do if I'm tested with something like this? And just like if we hear, unfortunately, it's like if we hear that someone gets hurt, let's say, and we make dua that Allah protects us all and protects our families as well. If someone gets hurt in a car accident, then start sharing it with people like, oh, that's incredible, this guy, he got into such a terrible accident, and this happened, and that happened. Now imagine if, how often do we think that, okay, what if that was me? What if that, what would I do? How would I go on? What would happen with my family? How would I react in that situation? So we should put ourselves in other people's shoes, rather than just getting lost in the story and the gory details of something. We should think that, okay, what if something like that happened to me? How would I respond to that? So when we go over some of these stories, which we'll do today, inshallah, and when we think about Dajjal and the Prophet ﷺ was warning about him, and we read that hadith, and I'm sure most of us have read it or heard it. When we should think that, okay, if Dajjal were to come and to try me and poses a fitna for me, if he was a trial for my people, my family, whoever it might be, how would we respond to that? Would we have the iman that is necessary, the yaqeen that is necessary to fend off his invitations? Because that's what he will do. He will invite people. they give the da'wah. So this is something that we should really, really question ourselves. And the Prophet ﷺ really encouraged us to read this surah, and of course he paired it with protection from Dajjal as well. So we'll try and figure out why that is. And so we'll look at the 4 main stories in this surah, and I won't go into all of the details because it would take a very long time to talk about the intricate details of each of these surahs. But I just wanted to kind of give us a perspective. It's just some lens that we can wear every time that we read this on Fridays, and we can try to understand, okay, why did the Prophet want me to read this on Fridays? How does it how is it supposed to be a protection from Dajjal? What's with all these stories? Like, what's the significance of the stories? And is it just story time? So it shouldn't just be story time. So let's go into that right now, inshallah. Now, Surah Al-Kahf is named after the very first story in the surah. And the very first story is, of course, the story of Ashab al-Kahf, the people of the cave. So the people of the cave are, now there's also precedence for this in other scriptures as well. They're called the 7 sleepers. They're 7 sleepers. Actually, before we jump into this, let me just talk about how this surah is connected to the previous one, and also why it was revealed. I should go into that first. As you can tell, I'm excited to get into the story, into the surah, because it's such a rich surah. It's it's very, very deep and just very interesting to talk about. So I'll try not to drag this one out, inshallah. Now, this surah was revealed in Mecca. The Prophet ﷺ was in Mecca, and this is when it was revealed. And the reason for revelation, according to pretty much almost like a consensus of scholars, that when the Prophet ﷺ was giving da'wah in Mecca, he would often be tested. So the people, the Quraysh, were doing anything they could to try and prove the Prophet ﷺ's message wrong. So one of the tests that they decided to do was they decided to ask that some of the Jewish tribes who were living in Medina at that time. So they were living in Yathrib. So they knew that there were Jews living in Yathrib, and they knew that they had amongst them, biblical scholars, those who were rabbis, who were well versed in scripture and things like that. So they said, okay, let's go and ask them, how can we test this guy? How can we be certain that he's actually a prophet? Because we know they have prophets and stuff. So they went, they asked, and they said, okay, you have to ask them these 3 questions. And they said, okay, what are the 3 questions? The first question is, ask them about the young man who went to sleep in a cave. And then the second question is, ask them about the man who traveled the east and the west. And then ask him about the reality of the soul, the reality of ar-ruh. So the Prophet ﷺ, when the mushrikeen that came back from Mecca, or from Medina, they came to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, and they asked him these 3 questions. And Nabi ﷺ, he did not know the answer. And that's absolutely acceptable. The Prophet ﷺ is not supposed to know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supposed to tell him, which is exactly what eventually did happen. So Nabi ﷺ said, okay, come back to me tomorrow, I'll have an answer for you. And he did not say, inshallah. He did not say, inshallah. And this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alludes to in this surah. That whenever you have an intention to do something, if you're very, even if you're hopeful, but be it, hope or confidence, whatever it might be, that something is going to happen tomorrow, or you want something to happen tomorrow, definitely, you should add a little disclaimer, add a caveat to it that if Allah wills, it's going to happen. If not, then it won't happen. The Prophet ﷺ forgot. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly wanted Nabi ﷺ to forget this. He wanted him to forget this because by doing so, a few things happened by the Prophet ﷺ forgetting to say inshallah. So firstly, the Prophet ﷺ, because he forgot to say inshallah, then the mushrikeen, they came the next day, they said, okay, tell us. And Nabi ﷺ was unable to. He said, come back the next day. And they came back the next day, and Nabi ﷺ was unable to. And obviously, if this is happening for day after day after day, and days on end, then the Prophet ﷺ is going to become even more of a subject of ridicule for these people. He's a target for their mockery. Because they're saying, oh, you are supposed to be a prophet, you can't even answer these simple questions. Why not? And Nabi ﷺ continued to put up with their abuses. He said, okay, just come back tomorrow. And some people really were thinking that, why doesn't this guy just make something up? Like, he could just lie. He could just make up a story and he could give his own version of the story. And, okay, they're not going to know any better. So if this was any other person, if this is a person who was not sincere in their call, in their da'wah, in their message, number one, if the person was, either... If he was not a prophet, then he would have definitely caved. That's it. Or, let's say, okay, if somebody says, I still don't believe he's a prophet, then you say, okay, you don't have to believe he's a prophet, but you cannot deny that he was very adamant, that he was determined, and he really stuck to his guns, that he didn't give up. No matter how much they ridiculed him, he said, okay, just come back tomorrow. Okay, just come back tomorrow. Okay, just come back tomorrow. And according to some scholars, this went on for, 2+ weeks. 2+ weeks. According to others, it was just a few days, but it went on for a considerable amount of time. until finally Jibreel alayhi salam comes to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he reveals to him and he tells him, okay, this is why you didn't, this is basically what happened, and you forgot to say this, and he revealed this surah, Surah Al-Kahf, as well as Surah Al-Isra, which is the surah that we did previously. Surah Al-Isra, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, both of these surahs were revealed upon him. And the connection between these two surahs is that, aside from, we'll get into the first and last ayah, but we'll also talk about how these three questions were answered. So the question about the sleepers of the cave, that is the first story in this surah. And then the final story in this surah is the one about the man who traveled the east and the west. And then the question about the ruh, of the spirit of the soul. This is actually a trick question. This is a trick question for the Prophet ﷺ, because no one is supposed to know. And this question was not answered in Surah Kahf. This question was answered in the previous surah, which we mentioned earlier, that the Jews had asked the Prophet ﷺ the reality of the soul, and they said, okay, tell us, ma haqiqatul ruh. Nabi ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed upon him that say this, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, tell them. Okay, what should you tell them? الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. That the soul, the spirit, is from the command of my Lord. And I don't know anything about it, neither do you. We only know what Allah has informed us. So that answer is given in the previous surah. The other two answers are given in this surah. So that's already the connection between the two, that from the three questions, they were answered by way of these two surahs. Now, another benefit of the Prophet ﷺ not being able to, or basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not revealing it right away, and the Nabi ﷺ going through the whole this ordeal at the hands of the mushrikeen, was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him even in this surah that if you want something to happen, do not so confidently say that you are definitely going to do that. وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ لِشَيْءٍ إِنِّي فَاعِلٌ ذَلِكَ غَدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and do not say, وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ. This is with serious emphasis. Don't say this, that I'm going to do this tomorrow. Okay, except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will. If Allah wills for it to happen, then I'll be able to. If not, then I won't. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alludes to this in the surah. And so it's a lesson for us, right? So it's a clear lesson for us that we cannot be so confident thinking that, oh yeah, definitely, this is a given, I'll definitely see you tomorrow. How do you know we're going to see them? Anything could happen. Anything could happen. So we should always add that, that little epilogue or a preface to our statements, that inshallah, if God wants for it to happen, if He wills for it to happen, it will happen. And this is a way for us to remember that at the end of the day, we're not in charge. We don't have total, complete autonomy. We definitely have, a considerable amount of control, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who has the final say. And, the revelation of the surah is a great indicator of that. Now, I said that there's also a connection between this surah in terms of verses, the previous surah and this one. So Surah Al-Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the very, very final verse of that surah. So if you flip to the final verse, it's verse 110 of Surah Al-Isra. So the last verse of that surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقُلِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ. وَقُلِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is the very final verse, He says that, and say that alhamd, the praise, total, complete praise, is for Allah. It belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the next surah, Surah Al-Kahf, the next surah, okay, the next verse, basically the next verse, so we just ended one surah with the last verse, and the next surah that we begin with the first verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He say? Alhamdulillah. Okay, so this is how we begin. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a command at the end of that surah, says, okay, say this. And then He begins the next surah with us basically fulfilling that command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying, Alhamdulillahi alladhi. Now, if you remember, so that's one connection. And then if you remember how we began Surah Al-Isra. Surah Al-Isra, the very first verse is, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, glory be to the one who has taken his slave by night. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He glorifies Himself by saying Subhanallah, basically. This is Subhanallah. And then He calls the Prophet ﷺ his slave. He says Abd. He can say, this is my slave. So Allah praises Himself, and then He calls Nabi ﷺ his slave. And then how does He begin? Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alhamdulillahi alladhi anzala ala abdihi. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He begins this surah with praising Himself and calling the Prophet ﷺ Abd again. So the first praise was Subhanallah, the second praise is Alhamdulillah. He calls the Prophet ﷺ his Abd, and then He calls him his Abd again. The first verse of Surah Al-Isra and the first verse of Surah Kahf. So these are the connection between, the parallels between these two surahs. Okay? Now, let's go into, because this surah is very story heavy, so I don't want to get lost into all of the details, so I'll just go over a little bit of the summary of these four stories. Now, the first main story, and this is the question that was asked the Prophet ﷺ about the sleepers of the cave. And as I mentioned, hope I mentioned that this is something that has been mentioned in other scripture as well. So it's called the seven sleepers, or the sleepers of the cave. There are different names for it, but basically the seven sleepers is the most common name that you'll come across. And this is a story that's very similar to the story that we mentioned in the Quran. However, we give details that they don't give. In the other scriptures, these details are not given. In the other scriptures, other useless details are given. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives important details in the Quran. The other one, they have inconsistencies, they have inaccuracies in their scriptures. And this was evident when the Prophet ﷺ, after he shared this story with the mushrikeen, who eventually shared it with the Jewish tribes, they were surprised. They were thinking like, wait a minute, how does this guy, how did he know? We didn't know that. Oh, he knows this, we didn't know that either. So let's just go very, very quickly over the surah, or very quickly over the story first. That a considerable amount of time before the Prophet ﷺ, definitely after Isa alayhi salam. So in between that 500-600 year span, there was a town, and in that town there was a king, a tyrant king, who had essentially forced his denizens who were living with him who were living under his command to worship his lords or his gods, whoever he so wanted them to worship. And there was a group of young men who they managed to find each other through fate, obviously through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will, and they came to an understanding. They realized that we can't this is not agreeable for us. We don't really like the way that things are going on here and how they are engaged in these kinds of strange worship and stuff like that. And they said, God can't be all of these statues and idols, and God's not many. God has to be one, just logically thinking. And eventually they begin to engage in worship in private and in secret. This reaches the ears of the king very quickly, because of course the king has, the walls have ears and the walls have eyes. So the king finds out, and then he holds them accountable for this grievous crime. But he gives them some respite. He says, look, I'll give you a chance to turn back, because you're from families, noble families and from noblemen. So I'll give you a chance to repent and admit to your fault and your mistakes. So the boys, they say, okay, yeah, sure, let's give us some time. And then eventually, as they leave the castle of the king, and upon doing so, they say that we're not going to go back to what they wanted us to. We're not going to listen to whatever this guy wants us to do. So they said, let's just leave this town, we'll make hijrah, we'll emigrate. And that's exactly what they decide to do. They decide to travel outside of the town and go find somewhere else. So they stop by in a cave just to take rest, because if you're just walking, you need somewhere to stay. So they decided to take a little nap, and as they go to sleep in that cave, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them sleep. So He gives them death. Now, death is not the death that you and I understand, but is whatever death that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to give them. And sleep is, of course, a type of death as in itself. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the young men, their souls, and they sleep for 309 years. Now, this is not a normal event, okay? If someone says, oh, your scripture says some young men went to sleep in a cave for 309 years, have you heard of, anyone going to sleep for 300 plus years? That's crazy. And you tell them that, yeah, you're right, it is crazy. Absolutely, we don't deny that. That's absolutely true. That's the point. It's a miracle. And miracles are supposed to be khariqun lil'ada. They're supposed to go completely against whatever is normal and acceptable and understandable. Okay, something that goes beyond our comprehension. Why do you think that's mentioned in the Quran? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to mention the story of a man going to go fish, and then he gets a fish, and then he says, oh, this is a nice fish, and he goes home and cooks it and eats it. How is that significant? How is that a special and miraculous story? This is a miracle. That's why Allah mentioned it. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it. So anyways, they sleep in the cave, and then eventually they wake up, and upon waking, they, through some dialogue, they think that, okay, how long do you think it's been? So, and they have no idea that it's been 300 plus years. They think it's only been a day, half a day. And so they decide, let's go back into the town, and some of us should go into the town, not everyone, go into the town. We should get some food because we're definitely hungry. They said, okay, let's sneak into town, because remember, the townspeople are after us. So a couple of them, one or two of them, sneak into the town, and eventually, they, through some, stumbling here and there, they find out that this is not the town that we were in. This is not the people, these are not the people that we had interacted with, and these are a completely different group of people. What happened? So you start talking to people, and eventually they realize that, hold on, it's not been a half a day or a day, it's been centuries. has been centuries have passed, and generations after generation, and the new generation that is now in this town, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has replaced those, the polytheists of old, those people who disbelieved in God, with monotheists, people who are on the pure fitrah, people who are on pure understanding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaced these people, and He had changed the halat, the conditions of this town. So the king is also a pious man, he's a righteous man, and he goes back with the boys one or two of the boys, he goes back to the cave, and then as they get to the cave, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala eventually takes the souls of all of them at that moment, and He gives them death there. And then eventually these young men, the townspeople, they build a masjid, or a place to pray over there, basically. A masjid is essentially anywhere you make sajda, anywhere, a place of worship. So they make a form of, some type of temple or a masjid or whatever you might call it, to pray, for people to pray there and to commemorate this miraculous event that occurred right there, from people who are their forefathers, technically. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings this story. Now, this is the first story in the Quran, in this surah, in Surah Al-Kahf, and let's think, how does this relate to the story of Dajjal? Now, this story is a big test. It illustrates a big test, the test of youth, as well as the test of an oppressive king, oppressive rulership, as well as living in a corrupted society. Would you do that? So you notice that the young men, when the king tried to oppress them, they said, "Okay, give us some time," and they left because they realized that we don't have a chance. We can't stand up against the king. He has an army. We're 6, 7, 8 of us. What are we going to do? So they cut out of town and they leave, and they make hijrah. During the time of the Dajjal, the Prophet ﷺ says, a Muslim is not a coward. A Muslim never backs away, never run away from a battle. However, the Prophet ﷺ says, when it comes to the Dajjal, you have to retreat. If you hear that the Dajjal has come to a place, don't go there and see, okay, let me just see, I'm curious. This Prophet ﷺ says that turn around and go back. Seriously, go and abort mission and just run around, or run away. Okay, just run away, get away from him. So this is the encouragement of the Prophet ﷺ, that this is not a test or a trial that you want to meet. So these young men, they realize we can't stand up to this tyrant king. And the Dajjal will have some kingship. He will have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him strength, and He will give him some type of sultanah, some type of control and command over the people. And who knows, what that will be, but he's not going to be just some layperson. He will be someone of significance and influence. So we are encouraged to run away from him, just like these young men, they ran away from that tyrant king. They made hijrah. And then the society that they were living in, look at that society that, it was filled with people who were not even on fitrah. The people, they were very much inclined to obeying the king. Whatever the king said, we do it. So the people at that time, the time of Dajjal, they will obey him. They'll listen. Whatever Dajjal wants us to do, we're going to do it. That's it. So they decide, okay, we have to get away. And eventually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed those people. He did away with those generations, and He brought pious, righteous people, which is inshallah will happen when it comes to Dajjal as well. That Dajjal will be removed, and the people who are his followers will be removed as well. And Isa alayhi salam will come, Jesus Christ will come Himself, and when He comes, and then He will have pure followers, people who are on fitrah, people who are upon the proper human nature, that pure human nature that we are supposed to be and that we have been built upon. That is what those followers will be. So these are just some of the points and some of the parallels between what has happened in the past and what is to come in the future. So it's an example for us that, hey, these young men, they ran away and they sought refuge far away, outside, away from society. And sometimes, you might be put in that situation where there's nothing that you can do. And the best option is just to turn around and hightail it back to the mountains. Just get away. Just get away, because what are you going to do? You are at risk, you're risk of losing your property, losing your iman, losing your life, everything. So it's just not worth it. Live to fight another day, which is exactly what these young men do. So that's the first story. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings a second story. So the second story that He brings is, now there is a very beautiful parable that is actually given, I believe, between these two surahs, between these two stories, it's between these two stories of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that life is essentially like the rain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has descended upon earth. And it would take, again, a very long time to go into this. I would highly recommend reading about it or listening to some lectures about this parable that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given, because it's very profound, very, very beautiful. Now, let's go to the second story in this surah. This is the story of two men. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given two men. He had given one of them a considerable amount of wealth, and the other one, he had essentially he had not given him as much wealth, or not much wealth at all. Okay, so you have one who's very, very wealthy and one who is probably not even well-to-do, or not even an average wealth. So one of them has money and power, influence, large family, children, all of this. The other one, not so much. He barely has anything. And however, the key difference between these two is not the materialism. It's not the fact that one is, very much enraptured by what he has in terms of physical possessions, but that he is enraptured with his own ego. The person is completely obsessed with what he has, and he thinks that he has all of this because God loves me. That's it. And he's not afraid of God. That's the thing. He thinks like, God's not going to hold me accountable. This is all mine. God wouldn't give me this if he didn't love me. And if God has given me all this, and let's say he decides that he's going to bring me back one day. He doesn't believe in the day of judgment. This man does not believe in accountability. But he says that, and even if there is, look at where I am today. Do you think that someone like me is going to be downtrodden in the hereafter? Absolutely not. And he's very confident. He thinks that God will give me even better when it comes to the day of judgment. God will treat me even better. So he walks into his gardens, because he has gardens. I mean, imagine like vineyards today, right? I mean, massive, pastures and fields and everything that this man could want is all of these things. He walks in with absolute pride and arrogance, and even before, he speaks down to his companion, the other person, probably his neighbor or something. He really speaks down to him. He degrades him. He says, "What do you have?" And the young man says, "Look," or the other man, he says that, "Look, you should really, really thank God for everything that He has given you. Don't think that this is because of your own doing." And he says that if you honestly, and so it's the man who doesn't have much, talking to the one who has a lot, he says to him that if you sincerely believe that, I am less than you, just because I don't have enough or as much money as you do, just because I don't have as many kids as you do, just because I'm not as popular and famous as you, if you sincerely believe that, then perhaps Allah will test you. Perhaps Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test you and He will take away your possessions. Perhaps Allah will send some kind of punishment, and what if He takes all of that away? Then what will you do? And the man, he takes it as an empty threat. He says, "Okay, yeah, whatever, we'll see what happens." So he walks into his property, and he's filled with himself. He's ظالم لنفسه. The person, he is oppressing himself. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. And what greater oppression can we commit than separating between ourselves and God? When we completely distance ourselves from God, and there's that disconnect between the two of us, this is the greatest volume and oppression that we can commit upon ourselves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a punishment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spends a good 3 or 4 verses right here, just in this surah, just consecutively talking about all of the things that He has given this man. That we have given him this and this and this and this. We have given him all these things, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala details it. And then when it comes to the punishment that He gives him, He only uses 2 words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses 2 words to talk about how everything that He has given him, you can imagine it's miles and acres of property and land. And the amount of wealth that this man has, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in 2 words, He takes it away. He says, وَأُحِيطَ بِثَمَرِهِ. That's it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that his all of his possessions, they were surrounded. Okay, that's because that it's honestly difficult to translate it, because it's in 2 words. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just says that everything that he had, we took away. We completely took away. Okay? All of his physical possessions, all of his wealth and his property, his family, whatever it was, all of it's gone. All of it's gone. And the man is left. فَأَصْبَحَ يُقَلِّبُ كَفَّيْهِ عَلَى مَا أَنْفَقَ فِيهَا. And then this man, he's left doing, this where a person turns their palms up, it's where they don't, like, they're completely lost, it's like you're just standing normally, and then you're just thinking, what happened, right? So it's like you're turning your palms up. So this is an expression of just shock and disbelief and complete sadness, regret. All of these emotions this man is feeling, because he thinks, what just happened to me? Right? He just lost everything. Just lost absolutely everything. And this is the trial of wealth. The trial of wealth. And this is something that Dajjal will also put the people who are living on earth at that time, he will put people through. Because the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says that Dajjal will be able to withhold the rain. So he will demand from people their allegiance. He will demand from them their obedience. The ones who give him their obedience, he will be able to make it rain, essentially, and literally, not figuratively. He will be able to open up the heavens, and the clouds will burst forth, and their crops will grow, and people will become wealthy, and they will be living in comfort. Those who don't, then he will make a drought afflict their lands, however he so does. And the people, they will be living in starvation and poverty as a result of this. So he will give wealth to those whom he desires, and he will take away from whomsoever he desires. And Allah will give him this ability. Don't think that this goes against the will of Allah. Allah is giving him this ability as a means of testing those people at that time. So in this story, those two men are tested. One is tested with wealth, one is tested with poverty. The one who's tested with wealth, look at how he sincerely thinks that, this is never going to disappear. And he thinks that even if it disappears and I die, don't worry. And if God, brings me back, God's going to give me even better. So this is something known as a prosperity doctrine. And this is, I believe, is very prominent in evangelical Christianity. So evangelicals, they believe that the person who has, a person who's wealthy, then this is a sign of God's love. God wouldn't give you wealth if He didn't love you. We absolutely don't believe this. Wealth can be a test from Allah. It can also be a blessing from Allah, or it can be both. Okay, simultaneously. Just as poverty can be a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, poverty can also be a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Both of these things. And the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, there's a very stark dichotomy between some ahadith which talk about how it's incredible, wealth can be so beneficial, and the others, and they say the wealth is so dangerous and destructive. And there were scholars, some of them who were extremely wealthy. Some of the scholars, mashallah, they were very, very, very wealthy. There are Sahaba who were unbelievably wealthy. Who would make, kings of today look like, beggars and paupers. And then there were Sahaba, there were scholars as well, from even till today, who lived in absolute destitution, complete poverty. So they were both sides of the scale. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses however He so decides to give. Both of them, are a means of getting closer to Allah. Both of them are a means of getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this story, we see one man, he was tested with wealth, and he failed that test miserably. The other man was tested with poverty, and that man, he succeeded. He passed his test, and he said that, God is the one who has given me all of this, or God's the one who has, given me life. That's what he is appreciative of, because that's what he tells the wealthy man. This man is just happy that, hey, at least I have my body, at least I have my health. God made me from, a piece of just a drop of dirty fluid, and He has made me into the man that I am today. So He's grateful for that, even if he doesn't have physical property. The other man, on the other hand, he can't have enough. No matter what he has, it's not enough for him. So this is a very important test that Dajjal will test people when it comes to, or this is a very important lesson. Dajjal will test people when it comes to wealth. And there are, we should be very, very careful. If today our wealth has us, with a stranglehold, and we're constantly checking our bank balance, and we find it difficult to even donate here and there. Even in the month of Ramadan, we find it difficult to donate. Then what will we do? What will we do when the Dajjal comes and he promises us wealth? So if it's hard for us to turn down a job at a company that is engaged in some shady dealings or engaged in something completely impermissible, if it's difficult for us to not invest in a company or buy stocks, in a company that's haram or that engages in haram, then what will we do when, if we can't even turn down a 5% gain or a 10% profit, what will we do when the Dajjal comes and promises, to multiply our wealth by 10, by 20, by 30? How will we turn him down? So this is a stark lesson for us, and something to really keep in mind when we read this story in particular. Now, the third story, and I'll try not to go too much into it, because it's the story of Musa alayhi salam. Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't want to go too much into it, so I'm going to have to control myself here. That essentially, I'll just mention the details that I mentioned in the surah, because in the ahadith, there is hadith, and especially in Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ details the story of Khidr and Musa alayhi salam. The Prophet ﷺ actually brings the name of Khidr, because the name Khidr is not mentioned in the Quran, but it is mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's a Sahih hadith where he talks about this story, this event. Essentially, Musa alayhi salam, he comes to know of a man who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him knowledge that Musa alayhi salam was not privy to. So Musa alayhi salam is, this is that talibul ilm, that he has that desire for knowledge. He decides, okay, I'm going to go seek him out. I want to know. So he finds his way to this man, and they set off on a journey. As they cross a river, a man decides to give them a ride across the river on his boat, and so it's Musa alayhi salam and Khidr alayhi salam, and they get on the boat to travel across, and the man has said, I'm not going to take any, I'm not going to charge you for anything, and it's a free ride across the river. I said, okay, great. So as they're going and as they're about to land on the shore, Khidr, he breaks a hole into the ship and he damages it, and then they jump off, and then he says, okay, let's go, let's get out, and then they run away. Man finds out, becomes obviously furious that someone has damaged the ship, especially if it's those men who I just gave them a free ride. Musa alayhi salam is shocked. He thinks that, what's this? Why did you, hurt this or damage this person's property? This is completely impermissible. And Khidr said, remember when I told, I gave you a condition. If you want to follow me on this journey, if you want me to teach you, then you can't ask any questions until I tell you. So Musa alayhi salam said, okay, sorry, I forgot. Said, okay, let's keep going. They keep traveling until they reach a young man. They see the children are playing, and right away, Khidr kills the young man. So he kills a little boy. And Musa alayhi salam is shocked. I mean, this is completely unacceptable. Musa alayhi salam just, loses it. He said, how can you do this? This is something completely, and Musa alayhi salam was known for being a man who was, very, very jovial, very, very energetic, to say. So he speaks up and he says, this is, not okay. And Khidr says, remember what I told you. This is the second warning. Remember what I told you. And Musa alayhi salam says, okay, I'm sorry, let's, I don't have any more excuses. If I do it again, then you don't have to, you can tell me to get lost. He says, okay, let's go. So they keep traveling, and, the hours pass, and they pass by a town. So they go to the town, they ask the townspeople for some hospitality. They said, can you take care of us, give us some food, give us something to, give us some rest, whatever. And the people are very harsh with them. They say, no, get out. And they push them out. This is, unacceptable. I mean, these are... I believe you mentioned this earlier, that it's, if you're traveling, especially in those days, you're just traveling through towns and villages, then, you would expect some form of hospitality. The people were, refuse to take care of them at all. So as they're leaving the town, Khidr repairs a wall that was breaking down, that was falling down. So this looks like, some municipality business, and here's Khidr going out of his way to repair the wall of these people who just hurt them and, abused them. So Musa alayhi salam thinks, okay, this makes no sense. He said, why are you doing this? Why don't we go demand from them some kind of money or some kind of, food or something? You just did this work for free. And Khidr tells him, okay, 3 strikes, you're out. This is what I told you. Don't ask me any more questions. And Musa alayhi salam says, okay, yeah, sorry, I messed up. He says, okay, let me tell you the reasons behind these, why I did what I did. He said, that the ship that I damaged at the beginning, I did so because, there's a king who is going to come. And this king, he needs ships for his army because they're going to be waging a war. So the army is going to come and they're going to take all of those ships and boats that belong to all of those farmers and those ferrymen. But that one that's damaged, they're going to leave that behind, because what are they going to do with the damaged ship? And that man will be able to repair it very easily. So in front of you, it looked like a terrible thing, but give it a couple of days and it's actually going to work out very well for that man. And then the next story is, the next incident was that of the boy that he killed. And he says, this boy here is going to grow up to become a very bad person. And he's going to become such a terrible person that he was going to lead his parents into disbelief and destruction as well. So not only was this young man going to become, or this boy was going to become a terrible person who was going to go to hellfire, but he was going to take his parents with him. So by taking his life now, we have guaranteed him paradise. Because what's going to happen if a child dies before they reach puberty, they immediately go into paradise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he does not obviously hold them accountable for anything. And he says that the parents will be gifted with another child. So the parents will be gifted with another child, and that child will be righteous. And those parents, they will appreciate this child even more because they've already lost one, and they will eventually be reunited, all of them, with that one other son that they lost. So, yeah, it was a terrible thing that you saw, but you cannot see, the future or what the possibility of this child held. And then finally, the third and last story, the third and last incident was that where they repaired the wall. Because underneath that wall, there's actually a treasure. There's a treasure there, and a lot of wealth is buried there. And it belongs to two orphans and their mother. So this is, it's a widow, and, her husband has passed away. Now, if this wall breaks down, and it's about to fall down, the townspeople would have come, they would have seen the treasure, they would have taken it for themselves. They're not even willing to give us a cup of water. Do you think they would have given this money and this wealth to these kids? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They would have taken it away from them. By repairing it, I gave it a few more years until eventually, the kids will have the ability to extract it, or if the wall falls down in a few years, then the kids will be older. Right now, they're just little kids, but when they're older, then they will be able to defend their wealth, and they'll be able to take it for themselves, and they will take care of themselves and their mother. Right now, their kids, what do they need with that excessive amount of money? And sure, the mom is definitely making dua. The widow, she's asking, Allah, that God take care of us. God, where am I going to get money and food? But they have no chance at this if the wall falls down right now. So though they want that dua to be accepted right away, Allah knows that it's better if it's accepted in the future. And He says that this is, what you cannot see. So Khidr is telling Musa alayhi salam that this knowledge, this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to Khidr alayhi salam, and it's kind of, it's a very, very strong indication that Khidr alayhi salam was a prophet, because for him to do these things is, no one really except a prophet is able to be judge, jury, and executioner. So there is some leeway that he could have been an angel, but I don't want to get into that debate, so I'm going to avoid that. So this is this story. The main test that we can take from this story is a test of knowledge, and this is exactly something that Dajjal will do. Dajjal will, he will really, really test people, and there will be those who they know that this is Dajjal. They know that this is the Dajjal, and because of that, they'll be able to run away and avoid him. And others, they'll say that, oh no, come on, Dajjal is actually, he's the computer, or Dajjal is supposed to be a TV, or he's a global system, or some, nonsense like this. So they will completely reject, these, people telling them that, no, you should avoid this person, you should avoid this. And, that sometimes it's like, parents are very, very, protective or overprotective. They get kind of paranoid, and the kids are like, oh, mom, dad, you're being too much right now, you're doing too much. But the parents know better. So during the time of the Dajjal, this will definitely happen. There will be scholars, there will be those people who are just pious, righteous people, and they will be trying to warn others, okay, you should stay away from them. Hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that, it will come to people actually chaining their family members in their homes, because the people are so desperate, they want to go and see the Dajjal. Even though it's not like they're going to say that, oh, his name is not going to be Mr. Dajjal, I don't think he's going to come out in a suit and a tie. But people will be so curious. They really want to meet him. They want to see him. They want to see what he's able to do, capable of, because this is a miraculous event. So the Prophet ﷺ says that people will resort to chaining their family members in their homes because they don't want them to leave. This is that test of knowledge. People are just, it's what you and I don't know. Sometimes if you don't know something, that's actually better for you. It's better for you that I don't know, and I'll just leave it at that. Don't think that we have complete total knowledge. If something happens, we shouldn't be so quick to judge and just say, oh, this is just a terrible thing. How do you know? For us to make it such a powerful statement, this is the best thing ever, or this is a horrible thing that happened. How do you know that this terrible thing that happened right now, it just prevented something much worse that could have happened 2 days from now? We don't know. Or because this thing happened, let's say, no one will be behind that, but let's say, we're driving somewhere, we get into a small little fender bender, we get into a little car accident. Okay, that's it. Nobody gets hurt, right? We just get a little bit dizzy and just a little, oh, now I have to pay for my insurance, I got to get my car repaired, all this, and that's a terrible thing. And then you can't go to your destination. Then you find out that at the destination there was a fire. Then what? You think, you're panicking, you're thinking, oh, it's such a terrible thing, I have to pay for my car, I have to do this and that. But, you just realize that, or, in a few hours you realize that, well, we just, we were supposed to go to that destination. And people really realize these kinds of things, people, it's like a very stark wake-up call when there have been accidents. People have gotten into car accidents, and people have gotten into plane, or people are supposed to get on a plane, and then that plane was they missed the flight, and that plane eventually got into an accident, or it fell out of the sky, or something happened, and they think that I was supposed to be on that flight, but I missed it. I know that 9/11 is a big example. Many people, there are people who are supposed to go to work that day, they didn't go to work, and the planes hit the buildings. There are people who are supposed to be on those flights, and they missed the flight because they overslept. And obviously you think that, oh, I bought a plane ticket and I missed my flight, this is terrible. And then you realize that, wow, I was supposed to be on that plane. So we should not be so quick to think that this is a horrible thing that's happened to me. What now? We don't really know. And now let's get into the fourth and final story. So this is the story of Dhul Qarnayn. Okay, Dhul Qarnayn was, of course, the man that the Yahud, the Jews of Medina, of Yathrib, had asked, or had told the Mushrikeen to ask the Prophet ﷺ, who was that man who traveled the east and the west and the north? That was him. So Dhul Qarnayn, the name literally means the two-horned one. Qarn is a horn. But there's a lot of debate. It's like a very lively debate. Okay, who was he, and what did he look like, and when was he, and where is his wall, and what does Ya'juj and Ma'juj look like, and where are they? And someone shared a very funny video with me just a few days ago about somebody had a dream where they saw Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and they said they were like like King Kong, right? They said that they had like a video of King Kong, and there's a guy talking with his voice in the background saying, this is what I saw, and this is them, and here's their wall, and okay, just please disregard all of these things. Again, right? We should not be, we shouldn't. This is not story time, right? We don't engage in. We should not engage in the hadith like this. We should not engage with the Quran like this. That, oh, this is so exciting. Let's go and draw a picture of what Ya'juj and Ma'juj look like, or where their wall could be. Let's go on Google Maps and try to find the wall of Dhul Qarnayn. That's absolutely not what the Quran and the Sunnah came for. It didn't come for our entertainment, and it didn't come to satisfy our curiosity. That's not it. So the Prophet ﷺ, he narrated this final story to them, and this is the story of the man who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him a control over a large army. He was a person who had, was probably some type of commander, he's probably some type of king, and he had, he traveled the east, and he traveled further, he traveled far east, he traveled far west, and he also traveled north. And, he met all kinds of different people, and eventually he came into contact with a tribe who, it was difficult for them to communicate. However, the tribe told him that, we are being apprised, we are being attacked by another, group of people, and these people, they're Ya'juj and Ma'juj. We can't communicate with them, but they're attacking us, and they're, giving us a very hard time. Can you do something? So eventually he gets them to, he seeks the help of the townspeople, of the neighboring, whatever the country it might be, and his soldiers, and then they construct a very massive wall. They construct a wall, and in order to keep out Ya'juj and Ma'juj from attacking these people. And that's how the story ends. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that, from Dhul Qarnayn's statement, that when my Lord wishes, then he will make this wall into nothing. He will completely crush it. And basically, Allah will give the command one day. It's not that it's going to last forever. Allah will give the command, and when he gives the command, it will be destroyed. And Ya'juj and Ma'juj will, spring forth. So there's two mentions of Ya'juj and Ma'juj in the Quran. This is one of them, and there's also another mention in the Quran as well. And this is one of the major signs of the Day of Judgment that is explicitly mentioned in the Quran, which is a very rare thing. It's a very rare thing. And Hadith, the Prophet ﷺ basically states that Ya'juj and Ma'juj will come towards the end of times. So again, there's a lot of debate, and I don't want to get into that. So we'll just conclude with that part. And the one of the main lessons and morals that we can take from this is that sometimes there are just tests that are just too big. It's absolutely way too big for us to handle ourselves, and we just have to let it run its course. We absolutely do. It's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's not just for you alone, but it's for a large population, large group of people, and we just essentially have to let the test run its course and let whatever is supposed to happen. We have to protect ourselves as best we can, protect ourselves, our family, our iman. And then we just see, inshallah, whatever hopefully good will come from the end of this tribulation, which is exactly a tribulation of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. The people who are living there, they had no control. They were just very lucky that Dhul Qarnayn comes and they seek his help. And then he says, okay, I'll do what I can to help you. And that's what he does. So this is also the test of authority, of power. And Dhul Qarnayn, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly given him a great amount of power and authority. So the first story was that about a tyrant king. And then this final story was about, a righteous king and a leader, a good man who he led with authority, and he also led with, uprightness. So he did not oppress people, even though he had the absolute power to do so. Rather, he assisted others and he helped them. So this is not something that the Dajjal will do. The Dajjal will be like the first king, and he will not be like the second king. Rather, he will be obviously someone who oppresses and terrorizes. When Allah has given him the strength and power to do good, he will use it for evil. And this is, of course, the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ. This is what prophets do. Prophets are supposed to come and tell us the future. And Nabi ﷺ, he says, okay, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. So we are now at a stage where we're just essentially waiting for these final signs to take place. And according to most scholars, the minor signs have all been completed, and the major signs are the only ones that are left to come. I've said this before, and I'll say it again: don't get involved in debates and conversations. Oh, when is the Day of Judgment? When is the final day? And when is the sign? And when is that? When is this? That's not ever something that we should engage in. Honestly, it's a waste of time to sit there and try to figure out these kinds of things. Okay, that it's going to come next month, it's going to come in 4 years, it's going to come in 3 years, and Sheikh so and so and Maulana so and so and Mufti so and so says that Dajjal is the petrodollar, and he's actually working for Trump, and Trump is working for him, and Barack Obama is the king of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. All kinds of weird things. Don't get involved in any of this stuff. It's completely irrelevant. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did not waste his time in these kind of futile discussions, right? He would tell these things to his Sahaba so that they can narrate it down, and also for a means of warning for them, that okay, understand that you will have to meet Allah, and before you do, all of these trials and tribulations will come. How will you hold on to your religion when these trials and tribulations come? That you have been through other trials, you've been through hunger, you've been through poverty, okay, what are you going to do when Dajjal comes? The biggest test ever. How are you going to hold on to your faith? How are you going to hold on to your faith? Not how are you going to hold on to your money, how are you going to hold on to your life. No, not these. How are you going to hold on to your faith? That's it. So the Prophet ﷺ and you and I, when we discuss these things, when we listen to, and I'm sure we do, we listen to lectures on the Day of Judgment, or lectures on the signs of the Day of Judgment, basically. We should think that, how will I be able to protect my iman and my yaqeen when it comes to these things? My level of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is more important than anything else, which is more important. So that is what we should really, really keep in mind whenever we read the surah, as well as when we think about these things, when we hear about these things. And I'll end with just one final verse, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, shall I not tell you about those people? This is at the very end of the surah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about those people who are the ones who have completely lost all of their deeds. Okay, these people they've lost the plot, and who are these people? Al-akhsarin a'mala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls them al-akhsarin a'mala. Akhsar is a person who's the biggest loser, and the biggest losers in terms of their deeds. They're those people who, they do their actions, يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا. They live their lives, and they act, thinking that, oh, we're doing so well, we're doing the right thing, we're doing everything perfect. And they think that they're doing good deeds, but they will realize that when they come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment, that everything they have is like dust. It just flies away. It's nothing. It's hollow, empty. So there's different explanations of who are these types of people that will fall into this. According to many scholars, this refers to people who are engaged in bid'at, people who are engaged in innovations. Just all kinds of strange things that they invent into the deen. Oh, this is religion, that's religion, this religion, that's religion, and it's really not. So they do all of these things which are not prescribed by the Prophet ﷺ, are not prescribed by his Sahaba, are not prescribed by the Salaf, are not prescribed by trusted scholars over 1,500 years of scholarship. They're just making them up by themselves, or as they go along, or, oh, I think we should do this, I want to do this, this feels right, why can't I do this? And they continue to do it anyways. So according to many scholars, this is referring to that group of people. They don't do what they're supposed to, but they do all kinds of other weird things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says these are the biggest losers, because all these actions they did are completely worthless, they're useless. They did them and they get nothing out of them. So when it comes to our a'mal, we should stick to our actions, our deeds. We should stick to that which is authentic and verified. And the best way to understand that and to know that is to go to trusted, learned scholars. Honestly, you have to go to those people who are qualified and people who have the credentials to back those qualifications, and they're able to show you that, yeah, okay, I know my stuff, and I have people who can vouch for me. And then you can take from that person, Islamic knowledge. Okay, what should I do and what should I not do? Rather than just, oh, well, I can open up a book myself and I can, look something up on Google and decide what to do myself. No, that is a very, very, very dangerous thing. And it's not for the layman. It's not for the layman, we don't just go to any pharmacy we want to just pick out whatever drugs and medicine we want. We go to a doctor and the doctor prescribes for us. And there are different prescriptions for different people. So when we go to scholars, we go to learned scholars, wise learned scholars, they will be able to direct us with that which is best for us. And inshallah, on that note, that is where we'll conclude the kind of an overview of Surah Al-Kahf, and it's a very beautiful surah. I would highly, highly recommend that every single person read this, be it Thursday night or Friday throughout the day, whenever they find time, inshallah. If it's too difficult to read the entire thing in one sitting, then read several verses throughout, and spread them out throughout the day until you're able to, inshallah, finish this surah. And inshallah, we'll end on that final note. that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to do the right actions and stay away from evil and wrong. May He allow us to turn to the people of knowledge and those people who will give us true guidance, especially when real darkness falls upon us. May Allah protect us from ever seeing the fitna of Dajjal and from fitan that are even lesser than him, but still quite lethal and quite dangerous when it comes to our iman, our belief, which is of course the most important thing. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.